Hello, I'm Rob. So I'm a non-executive director of Calorie Balance. So effectively, our product works. It's very, very complicated, but in sort of simple terms, it effectively blocks your body and the natural digestive processes which your body has to break down starch and carbohydrates into smaller molecules, and then those smaller molecules can be absorbed. And so, if you kind of think of it like a process where there's like a few steps, and then the first step is break it down, and then it's absorb it. So if it's not broken down, then it can't be absorbed. So our product inhibits an enzyme, or the digestive process of the body, so it kind of can't be broken down, and then the calories which are associated with that then aren't absorbed. And it doesn't do it fully because it would never be a good thing to completely eliminate carbohydrates from your diet. They're a good source of energy, and you need to have them. It's just when you have too many, obviously there's some effects which can be found, such as becoming maybe more overweight, or having non-alcohol fatty liver disease or something like that, and the other health concerns around putting on additional weight or storing additional energy. So that's simply how our product works, and the reason that that's good is because it means that people can adjust the amount of nutrients and the amount of carbohydrates they absorb without actually adjusting their diet too much. And so that means that their body can get used to having less of these different nutrients, and then when they adjust their diet afterwards, then it doesn't cause a significant reaction from the body. So it can be done over time, so it's more of an easy process. So if you compare it to something like a drug or alcohol addiction, where your body becomes dependent on those things, because that, even though it's not as severe as those things, there are definitely some similarities, because it's both a biological process and it's both a substance which is an external substance which is being introduced into the body, which the body becomes dependent on. So in our case with carbohydrates, obviously, especially in the West and increasingly in Asia, processed carbohydrates are a staple part of our diet. And they've been seen as good, and there is obviously positives to them. You can get a lot of calories in a small amount of food, which is very, very powerful in some cases. But nonetheless, it can lead to overeating, because you get too many calories based on the quantity of food that you eat. So it means people aren't full, but they've had enough calories to fill them up. And then so they continue eating until they feel full, but then because of how highly concentrated the calories are within the foods they eat, because of how processed they are, it results in overconsumption despite not feeling overly full. It's just because of how nutrient dense the products are. So what we can do with our product is ensure that people can stay full and feel satisfied with their food, and the product will prevent some of those carbohydrates from being absorbed, and therefore some of the nutrients from being absorbed, which means that the body will not absorb as many of those, and get used to absorbing less. So then, similarly to the way that when you have something like nicotine, as in cigarettes, you might have like a nicotine patch, which would just give you small amounts of nicotine over time, and then you can wean yourself off the nicotine altogether. Or that's the idea, at least. And it's a similar kind of process which we're doing. Instead of replacing the carbohydrates with something else, or the cigarette with the nicotine patch, in that analogy, we're just reducing the amount in that. So it would be kind of similar to how in vapes, sometimes you can purchase vapes that have different strengths of nicotine in them. So over time, you can slowly come off the nicotine, and it won't be as big of a shock to your body, and therefore it will be much easier to do, and it won't take as much of a toll on the individual. So we're effectively doing that same process for carbohydrates, and just reducing the amount of carbohydrates they absorb, and then when their body gets used to the reduced absorption, we can then reduce the amount in their diet, and then take away the white kidney bean extract, and then their body gets used to that level, and the normal level, we can do it again, and slowly but surely we can just incrementally reduce the amount of carbohydrates that the body is expecting, and therefore reduce the amount that the body's absorbing, and because they're not eating as much, and then shift in more healthy options, including more fruit and vegetables, things like that have high fiber in, which make you feel full, but they're not quite as calorie dense in terms of carbohydrates, which is very good to ensure that the person mentally and psychologically is satisfied, but then also they have the actual nutrients that they really need, rather than eating too much. So doing this over time, like it's obviously going to be a process similar to how using like a nicotine patch is a process, or similar to how coming off other substances can be a process. You can either go cold turkey, but if anyone's ever tried to do that with a diet, it's very, very difficult to stick to, and often ends up yo-yo dieting, where you would eat very well for maybe a week, or you'd eat even extremely well, like just fantastically for a week, and the next week you'd have loads of cake and just really indulge, because it's just so hard to do. And that's simply because the body is expecting so strongly to have these different nutrients and these different amounts of carbohydrates, so it can be very, very difficult. But then in addition, it also can help reduce guilt. So if you were to have, for example, you'd go out with your friends and then you were to have a meal, even if you're on a diet really strictly normally, you could use our products before it, and then that would reduce some of the carbohydrates that you're taking up from that meal. So it wouldn't be quite as guilt-inducing, and you can kind of rest assured that you can still be part of the social circles, still have all of those wonderful activities which we all love, and still maintain your diet as well, and not have those negative ramifications which people are so used to and are so fearful of at the moment. So the Eat Out to Help Out scheme is a really interesting opportunity for our company, as well as a lot of other companies, and we are looking to potentially start some collaborations with a few different organisations. We're in talks with a few now, and we're starting to broach the subject of potentially putting our products into their foods. That process will be a little bit longer than maybe we'd like, because normally in a similar kind of situation, if it wasn't with the lockdown, we'd just go down to their place and just have a chat with them, try some foods out, that kind of thing. But a lot of them, especially some of the more artisan, which would be as in more like upper class or unique products, which is perhaps where we feel our products might be more suited. Because, for example, if we go to something like a McDonald's or a big chain that's already well established, they're quite busy and they've got a full menu that's already developed, and for us to develop a new product for their menu, which would include our products, would take a significant amount of time. It would go through a lot of bureaucracy, and it would be quite challenging to do. However, if we go to something a little bit smaller, for example, we've been talking to some bespoke chocolate manufacturers and chocolate makers in Newcastle, as well as we're looking at working with other restaurants and things like that, to actually put it into some products that maybe the timeline will be a little bit quicker, where perhaps we could go down for 1 or 2 days and just crack out some products in the kitchen, see what works, see what doesn't, and then start getting them on the shelves. And that is something that's really quite interesting to us, and it does seem to be quite a powerful potential. However, at the moment, one of the pieces of research, or a few of the pieces of research we were going to be doing, will be very complementary to this. So one of them was about reducing the heat issues that we have. So, for example, if the product is put in over a certain temperature, it gets denatured. It's quite a high temperature, around 60-70 degrees, so it's not a massive issue. And for example, if you just had a normal glass of water, no problem at all, or any normal cold food, that's fine. But a lot of the time when you go to a restaurant, you're getting hot food, and that is a bit of a difficulty. So if we were to put our product into something that was boiling, or something that was being fried, or in the oven, it would get quite significantly reduced. So like there are ways we can get around this temporarily, for example, making cold sauces that we can complement the food with, or putting it on at the end once the food has cooled down somewhat. So there is options, but then we go to the next problem, which is around a little bit of solubility. So if, for example, it's quite technical, but there's different types of solubility almost. There's like suspensions where the product would kind of float almost in the water. So if you think about if you have like water and then it's got like mud on the bottom of a pond maybe, and then you move it around, the water will become murky, and then it'll take a while for that to settle out. So that's suspension. And then there's solubility, where it's like sugar and water, where the sugar actually fully dissolves into the water and doesn't settle out at all. So our product doesn't fully dissolve at the moment. There is a sense of suspension within it. And what we're looking to do at the moment with one of our pieces of research is to actually make it fully soluble. And that would be something which would be very, very advantageous for our organisation, because that would differentiate us from our competitors, as well as making it much more convenient for the customer, and make it much more accessible to put into different products. However, like things like sauces, where they're quite thick, that is very much a possibility for us to put the product in already. Because of how thick the sauces are, the product doesn't settle out to the bottom. If you think about putting, same analogy, like the mud in, or the dirt in water, like if you were to put that in something like honey, like it just wouldn't settle out. It would just take forever to go to the bottom because of how thick it is and viscous. So if we're to make a more viscous sauce, then that's very, very viable to do that. So we are looking to do those and broker those conversations, though we're primarily focusing on working on the previous contracts which we had, just because of the size of those, because of the magnitude of the potential in the future, and how good we had of a relationship with those individuals, as well as some of the benefits which could be quite interesting for us in the long term.